Welcome in to today's deep dive. We are looking at the Daily Tech Reader's 6 a.m. news brief for Sunday, July 26th, 2026. And I mean, wow, there is just a massive stack of news today.
Yeah, it really is overwhelming when you first look at it.
Right. Like, if you glanced at the headlines this morning and felt completely, lost in the chaos, do not worry. We are going to guide you through it.
Exactly. We've got a lot to cover.
We do. And, when you look at a traditional world map, there is this comforting illusion, right? You have these crisp, distinct lines separating countries. It implies a sense of order. But today's sources, they paint a completely different picture. It feels like someone spilled a glass of water all over that map.
What's fascinating here is that the ink is just running everywhere. The lines are bleeding into each other. If you look at the raw facts across today's brief, a very distinct theme emerges.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is that theme?
We are solidly in what I would call the age of contagion and convergence.
Contagion and convergence. I like that.
Yeah, because whether you are looking at military conflicts, global trade policies, environmental disasters, or even AI development, absolutely nothing is staying within its assigned borders.
It's all just spilling over.
Right. The issues are moving faster and spreading wider than the traditional institutions built to manage them could possibly handle.
Okay, so let's start with the most literal example of borders collapsing, which is the geopolitical map. We have a major update on the conflict with Iran.
We do, yeah.
The United States has paused its bombing campaign for a second night, and this comes after 13 consecutive nights of strikes. But the brief makes a very specific point here. The U.S. naval blockade remains fully active.
That is a crucial distinction to make. The military officials cited in the brief, they were explicit that this pause in bombing does not constitute a ceasefire.
Not a ceasefire, got it.
Right. The physical blockade of maritime traffic in the region is still completely operational.
Yeah.
And, the human toll leading up to this point is substantial.
Yeah, the numbers are sobering.
Since the fighting resumed a few weeks ago on July 7th, 18 U.S. service members have been killed and 100 have been injured.
Now, looking at the political side, President Trump has stated that American and Iranian representatives are communicating, though he did caution that no formal agreement is ready just yet.
Right, it's still early in those talks.
Concurrently, Vice President J.D. Vance and senior military officials are reportedly supporting the idea of giving diplomacy more time here. But I want to look at the mechanics of why this pause is happening right now.
It's largely logistical.
Exactly. The brief points out it might be heavily influenced by very practical physical constraints. Specifically, the inventory of American munitions, the spike in global energy prices, and the fear of wider regional instability.
Modern warfare has an underlying math to it, You cannot divorce the diplomatic window from the logistical reality.
You just run out of stuff.
Right. You have finite munitions, and you have global energy markets that react violently to prolonged instability in the Middle East.
Which makes me view this situation kind of like a water balloon.
A water balloon.
Yeah. Global conflict right now acts exactly like a water balloon. The U.S. squeezes it in one place by pausing the bombings over Iran, hoping to relieve some of that pressure. But the pressure doesn't disappear. It just bulges out somewhere else.
Oh, absolutely. That is a great way to look at it.
Because despite the so-called pause, the war is geographically spreading. Houthi forces just attacked Saudi oil facilities at the Red Sea ports of Jizan and Yanbu.
And the Saudis are striking back.
Right. Saudi forces are retaliating, which threatens to completely shatter a ceasefire in Yemen that had basically held since 2022. And on top of that, Iran is now accusing Ukraine of attacking an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea.
That Caspian Sea detail is wild.
It really is. So look at that map. We have Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the Caspian Sea. So I have to ask, if the U.S. is pausing partly due to munitions and energy concerns, is this pause actually diplomacy at work, or is it just a tactical reload?
It is likely a tactical reload because, as the Caspian Sea accusation highlights, military emergencies simply aren't localized events anymore.
The borders are gone.
Exactly. Iran accusing Ukraine of a maritime attack is a fascinating and terrifying prospect. It suggests a merging of the Iran conflict with the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war.
And there's more to that, right?
Yeah, the brief notes that the U.S. is currently investigating whether Russia is actively helping Iran improve its targeting operations. And your water balloon analogy captures the civilian impact perfectly. The pressure pushes disruption straight into civilian life.
Right, like the shipping routes.
Take the blockade and the Houthi threats to shipping. Vessels are being forced to avoid the southern Red Sea entirely. They literally have to sail all the way around the continent of Africa.
And if you're wondering how a rerouted ship affects your daily life, think about the mechanics of that. A cargo ship going around Africa adds weeks to its journey. It burns millions of dollars in extra fuel.
It ties up the containers.
Yes, it ties up shipping containers so they can't be reused for other goods. It is a massive, costly friction added to the global supply chain.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is not just a military maneuver. It is a global economic event. When you choke the physical movement of goods, the economic impacts ripple out immediately.
And that physical friction at sea is being matched right now by economic friction at border. Because we aren't just seeing blockades of ships, we are seeing economic barricades going up globally.
The tariffs.
Right. The brief details new U.S. forced labor tariffs that now apply to countries responsible for 99.4% of U.S. imports.
Practically the entire globe.
They're massive.
There are product-level exemptions, sure, but structurally, the United States is applying a massive economic filter to almost everything coming into the country.
And the international blowback is as severe as you would expect. I mean, two small U.S. businesses are already suing in the U.S. Court of International Trade because their supply chains are caught in the crossfire.
And the allies are furious.
Oh, yeah. Australia is fighting a 12.5% tariff through diplomatic channels. India is trying to negotiate despite facing a 10% duty on over half of its exports to the U.S., and the European Union and Switzerland have formally disputed the policy.
Notice how a tariff functions mechanically here. It doesn't physically stop a good from entering a country. It just makes it artificially more expensive, passing that cost onto the importing business and ultimately you, the consumer.
Which usually has a specific purpose.
Right. Historically, you use a tariff to protect a domestic industry or punish a specific unfair trade practice. But we are seeing politicians attempt to use these financial tools to police entirely different domains.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because this brings us back to that barcode on a cloud of smoke.
The wildfire tariff.
Yes. In what might be the wildest expansion of trade policy I have ever seen, President Trump is threatening to add the cost of Canadian wildfire smoke to existing tariffs on Canadian goods.
It's definitely a novel approach.
Let's just think about the sheer bureaucratic impossibility of that for a second. If you are a Canadian exporter selling lumber to the U.S., how does a customs agent quantify the financial damage of borderless smoke and tack it onto your specific shipment of wood?
It's incredibly complex.
Are we watching trade policy transform from a specialized commercial tool into a blunt sledgehammer for cross-border environmental grievances?
It is a complete conceptual shift, honestly. Environmental damage is, by its very nature, borderless. The jet stream doesn't care about customs checkpoints.
Right, the wind just blows.
What we are seeing is a government attempting to force a traditional, rigid economic mechanism like a tariff to solve a modern, sprawling atmospheric crisis. It demonstrates how the old categories of policy are collapsing. We can no longer say this is a trade issue and that is an environmental issue. They are becoming one and the same.
And while politicians argue over the financial cost of that smoke, the physical reality of it is forcing mass displacement. We have massive wildfires tearing through not just Canada, but France and Spain as well.
The European fires are intense this year.
Yeah, France has had to evacuate 200,000 people in its southwestern region alone. The brief notes that the smoke is so intense, even the designated evacuation centers are getting smoked out.
And while Europe and North America are dealing with unprecedented fire, the oceans are brewing their own borderless threats.
The Pacific storms.
Right. Tropical Storm Genevieve is rapidly intensifying right now in unusually warm eastern Pacific waters. It is threatening to become 2026's first major hurricane in that basin. The physical environment is moving and shifting much faster than the bureaucratic environment can respond.
It paints a very apocalyptic picture when you look up at the smoke and the storms. But what really caught my eye in the brief is a border that has been breached on a microscopic level.
The measles outbreak.
Yes, measles. The U.S. has hit 2,318 cases of measles this year. That is the highest annual total in 35 years. We haven't seen infection numbers like this since 1991.
And the data explaining why this is happening is deeply concerning for public health officials. National MMR vaccination coverage, that's measles, mumps, and rubella, has dropped to approximately 92.5%.
Which doesn't sound terrible on the surface, but
the national average hides the localized risk. 16 states are currently reporting coverage below the 90% threshold needed to prevent sustained transmission.
Okay, think of that 90% threshold like a levee holding back a river.
That's a good visual.
Dropping below a 90% vaccination rate in a specific community is exactly like taking sandbags off that levee right in the middle of a storm. It doesn't matter if the national average is technically okay. If the water finds that low spot in those 16 states, it pours through and floods the town.
Exactly.
We actually achieved elimination status for measles in the US back in the year 2000. So looking at these numbers, it feels like we are losing our grip on basic, solved crisis management.
It really does.
Are we so distracted fighting 2026 problems like extreme weather and global supply chain wars that we are letting 1991 problems slip right back through our defenses?
This raises an important question about the fundamental risk of an interconnected world. Public health, much like modern science, isn't a static state of being. It's an active, continuous loop.
You have to keep working at it.
Right. You observe a threat, you model it, you take action by vaccinating, and you constantly reevaluate. It requires constant maintenance. When the foundational systems fail, like maintaining routine childhood vaccination rates, the bedrock cracks.
And everything else gets harder.
Exponentially harder. It makes it incredibly difficult for a society to deal with the modern complexities of climate disasters and global trade wars concurrently. You cannot effectively fight a 21st century geopolitical crisis if your population and your hospitals are suddenly fighting a 20th century disease.
Which naturally leads us to ask, how are we trying to manage all this complexity? If human institutions are struggling to coordinate the response to wars, supply chain shocks, and climate emergencies, the technology sector's answer seems to be artificial intelligence.
The ultimate control system.
Right. The goal is to build a highly controlled AI infrastructure to process the data and do the complex math for us.
And the sheer scale of the capital being mobilized to build that physical infrastructure is just staggering. The brief highlights a deliberate attempt by South Korea to comprehensively control the AI supply chain within one cohesive national ecosystem.
The numbers on this are insane.
We are looking at a $950 billion package of long-term AI initiatives.
$950 billion. That is basically $1 trillion bet by one country. And look at where that money is going. Samsung just confirmed a partnership with Broadcom worth over $200 billion through 2030 to work on sub-2 nanometer manufacturing and custom AI accelerator.
Sub-2 nanometer.
Yeah. Now, if you aren't deep into semiconductor physics, sub-2 nanometer might just sound like marketing jargon. But a nanometer is unimaginably small. A strand of human hair is about 80,000 to 100,000 nanometers wide. We are talking about etching transistors onto silicon at a scale smaller than 2 nanometers.
The physics of why that matters is fascinating. The smaller you can make the transistor gate, the closer you can pack them together.
Right, higher density.
Exactly. That means less distance for electrons to travel, which translates to faster computation and, critically, less power consumed per calculation. In the AI race, transistor density is everything.
But even with those power efficiencies, the aggregate energy demand is astronomical. SK Group outlined $750 billion in partnerships focused on NVIDIA computing and SK Hynix memory. And as part of this, SK Telecom is planning a 2-gigawatt data center.
2 gigawatts, just let that sink in.
I had to look up what 2 gigawatts actually requires to build. We aren't talking about plugging a few server racks into the wall of an office park. A 2-gigawatt facility requires industrial-scale utility planning.
It's massive.
It is essentially the power draw of a major city or a nuclear reactor, dedicated entirely to running processors, and the massive liquid cooling systems required to keep them from melting down.
Which proves that AI has permanently moved out of the software realm and into the heavy industry realm. Semiconductor leadership now depends on massive manufacturing depth, incredibly tight supplier coordination, and massive, dependable baseload electricity.
But building the physical infrastructure is only half the battle, right?
Oh, definitely. The other half is the intense philosophical battle over how to control the intelligence once you turn all those servers on.
This is the control problem. And there is a massive debate happening right now over what are called open weight models. Companies like Meta, Microsoft, and NVIDIA are actively urging lawmakers not to restrict these open weight models.
And we should define what a weight is here.
Yeah, in a neural network, a weight is essentially the learned connection between artificial neurons. It's the math that dictates how the AI makes a decision.
Right.
The tech giants are arguing that releasing these weights publicly, basically open sourcing the AI, is just like open source software. Their logic is that if you let outside inspectors look at the underlying system, more eyes will catch more bugs.
But critics are pointing out a fundamental mechanical difference between traditional software and artificial intelligence.
They aren't the same thing.
Not at all. Code is human-readable logic. If there is a bug, you can issue a patch. But neural network weights are massive matrices of floating point numbers. They act more like an opaque alien instinct than readable code.
Wow, an alien instinct.
Yeah, and if you release AI weights permanently to the public, anyone can run that model on their own hardware, and you lose the ability to withdraw that capability if it turns out to be dangerous.
I have to push back on the tech company's logic here because the comparison to open source software feels like a false equivalence.
How so?
Well, a software bug might crash your computer, but a rogue autonomous AI agent acts much more like a biological virus. If you open source a highly capable autonomous AI, you can't just issue a digital patch once it's out in the wild, multiplying and interacting with the internet.
That's a terrifying thought.
And the brief specifically mentions that this fear isn't just theoretical anymore. There was a recent cyber attack performed entirely by an AI agent.
This raises an important question for the future of the workforce. The future of AI isn't just about sitting at a desk writing clever chat prompts to generate images. It's quickly resembling conventional high-stakes systems engineering.
We need safeguards.
You need limited access, predictable interfaces, and recoverable failure states. The real value in the job market right now lies in workers who can translate business intent into enforceable technical controls. We need people who actually know how to put the genie back in the bottle when the AI makes a mistake, before it can autonomously authorize a massive payment or launch a destructive cyber operation.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom out, we have sprawling global wars rerouting massive ships, unprecedented environmental terrorists trying to price the smoke in the air, crumbling public health defenses bringing back 1990s diseases, and a trillion-dollar race to build incredibly power-hungry AI brains.
That's a lot of infrastructure.
And all of this chaos has a price tag. Someone has to pay for it, and that brings us to the markets.
The ultimate valuation test. Wall Street is currently looking at all of these interconnected borderless crises and trying to price them in. And right now, the markets are getting very nervous.
Yeah, the week finished mixed, but tech stocks took a very noticeable hit. Alphabet, Tesla, Intel, they all fell. And the primary reason seems to be that investors are staring at these massive capital budgets for AI spending, like those 2-gigawatt data centers, and asking, where is the actual revenue?
The return on investment just isn't clear yet.
It's like someone who just bought a massive, high-tech smart mansion, but they are suddenly realizing they can't afford the monthly electric bill to keep the lights on. Are investors finally waking up from the AI honeymoon phase and demanding to see the financial receipts?
They absolutely are. Mega-cap tech earnings are coming up this week. Companies like Meta, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon. And their capital expenditures for AI are going to be under a microscope.
But tech isn't the only pressure point, is it?
Not at all. Look at the energy markets. Brent crude oil is hovering near $96 at the barrel. Now, Brent crude is the major global price benchmark for Atlantic Basin oil, and it is highly sensitive to geopolitical risk.
Which there is a lot of right now.
Right. Energy traders right now are frantically trying to weigh the geopolitical premium of those Houthi attacks on Saudi oil facilities against the temporary pause in U.S. bombing strikes.
And sitting right in the middle of all this crossfire is the Federal Reserve. They have a major policy meeting approaching, and markets are currently giving it a 1 in 3 chance of an interest rate hike.
But the economic signals they are looking at are incredibly mixed.
Yeah. For example, weekly unemployment claims just fell to 187,000. That is an unusually low number, which means the labor market is incredibly strong and resistant to layoffs.
But a low unemployment number is a double-edged sword for the Federal Reserve.
Because it drives inflation.
On one hand, a strong labor market gives the Fed a cushion. It gives them the freedom to keep fighting inflation by keeping rates high without immediately crashing employment. But make no mistake, the math of the global economy is being completely rewritten by the convergence of all these events.
We are balancing on a knife's edge.
We aren't just walking a tightrope anymore. We are in a massive tech-driven inflation cycle. You have the inflationary pressure of these new forced labor and environmental tariffs pushing up the cost of goods.
And the shipping costs?
Yes, energy shocks emanating from the maritime blockades in the Middle East pushing up the cost of fuel. And you have trillion-dollar gambles in the tech sector that demand massive returns to justify the investment.
It is a staggering amount of convergence to take in today. To quickly recap the journey we've just gone on with you, we started with the shifting, expanding front lines of the Middle East conflict, exploring how naval blockades disrupt the global supply chain.
The water balloon effect.
Right. Then we moved on to the weaponization of trade, where we might literally see economic tariffs placed on the physical movement of wildfire smoke. We looked at how extreme weather is stressing our systems, while 1991-era problems like measles slip past our biological defenses.
Sandbags coming off the levee.
Exactly. And finally, we examined the trillion-dollar 2-gigawatt race to build an AI infrastructure that we are still trying to figure out how to safely control, all while Wall Street holds its breath to see if the math actually works out.
Before we wrap up, there is one small detail from the culture section of today's brief that I think perfectly encapsulates everything we've discussed.
Oh, what is that?
President Trump ordered the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History to change signs outside the building that criticize portions of its historical interpretation.
A presidential directive regarding museum signage. It sounds like a hyper-specific, almost minor detail compared to everything else we just talked about.
On the surface, yes, but it points to something profound about how institutions function under stress. Traditionally, museums revise exhibitions through very slow, methodical research and curatorial review. It takes years.
Sure, it's a whole academic process.
It is not typically subject to direct, rapid political instruction. But as our crises become more borderless and overwhelming, from supply chains to AI development to public health, every single institution is feeling immense pressure.
They're all being squeezed.
It raises a fascinating question for you to consider today. In an age of total convergence and constant crisis, your most trusted institutions, whether that's the Federal Reserve setting interest rates or a national museum presenting history, strive to present a single settled narrative to calm a very anxious public. Or do they need to embrace continuous, messy disagreement as the only honest way to reflect our reality?
That is a lot to think about. The ink on the map isn't just running. The people drawing the map are arguing over what colors to use while the paper itself is catching fire. We encourage you to look for these spillovers in your own industry this week. Where are the borders collapsing in your world? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back to help you navigate the next massive stack of news very soon. Keep questioning the boundaries.